please don't scroll. Not because I need your attention, but because most of my life was spent being watched and still not being known. They think they know me. They know the jersey, the highlights, the moments, frozen in noise. But noise hides a lot. When people cheer loud enough, they stop listening. And when they stop listening, they stop seeing the person underneath. Everyone thinks my life was loud. Crowds, arenas, cameras, crowds, cameras, crowds, crowds. But the truth is quieter than that. The hardest parts always are. There's a difference between being admired and being understood. Admiration stands at a distance. Understanding requires staying close. They celebrated what I did. They never asked what it cost. They clapped when I won. They disappeared when I struggled. Not out of cruelty, out of comfort. Because it's easier to cheer a symbol than to sit with a human being. I learned early that if you show too much of yourself, people get uncomfortable. So I learned control, discipline, silence. I learned how to perform certainty, even when I was full of questions. How to look unbreakable, while carrying things no one saw. And the strange thing is, the louder the applause became, the quieter my inner world got. People think isolation comes from failure. It doesn't. It comes from expectation, from being needed to be something, all the time, from never being allowed to arrive as you are. They cheered me. They cheered hard. They cheered often. But cheering is easy. Knowing someone is not. And that difference, that space between the two, is where this story begins. Expectation doesn't arrive loudly. It settles in quietly. Day after day, until you don't remember who you were before it. At first, people say they believe in you. They tell you you're special, different, built for more. What they don't tell you is that belief turns into demand. Once people believe you can carry something, they keep adding weight. Not because they want to hurt you, because they don't feel it. They see the result. They don't see the strain. I learned that excellence has a cost. No one wants to pay with you. They want the ending. They want the proof. They want the certainty. They don't want the doubt that comes before it. So I stopped sharing it. I told myself that discipline meant silence. That real commitment didn't complain. That if something hurt, it was my responsibility to absorb it. Pain became routine. Not dramatic. Just constant. Waking up already tired. Practicing when the body asked for rest. Pushing when stopping would have been healthier. But stopping felt like betrayal. Not to them. To myself. I wasn't chasing approval. I was running from the idea of being replaceable. Because when expectation becomes your identity, rest starts to feel like weakness. And weakness feels dangerous. People say pressure creates diamonds. They forget. It also creates fractures. Small ones at first. Invisible. Easy to ignore. Until one day, you realize you've been carrying everything alone for so long that you don't know how to put it down. And the hardest part isn't the weight. It's the silence around it. Because everyone assumes if you're still standing, you're fine. There's a moment when belief changes. It's subtle. No announcement. No argument. One day, the voices sound not louder, colder. People still say your name, but the tone shifts. Expectation turns into evaluation. Support turns into measurement. They start watching for mistakes. Not because they want you to fail, because failure would make things simpler. It's easier to understand someone once they fall. I felt that shift before I could explain it. Conversations shortened. Patience thinned. Eyes that used to look forward started looking past me. Nobody said they were leaving. They never do. They just stop asking questions. They stop checking in. They assume you'll handle it. And you do. Because you always have. But handling something alone changes how it sits inside you. I was criticized in ways that ignored context. Judged by moments, not years. Reduced to decisions, without the weight that shaped them. I didn't fight back. Not because I didn't care, because explaining yourself to people who already decided who you are feels like talking to a closed door. So, I got quieter, not colder, just more careful. I learned that being misunderstood publicly hurts less than being misunderstood by people who once believed in you. Because public noise fades, distance from those close to you lingers. And when belief turns into distance, you start questioning things you never questioned before. Not your work, not your effort, your judgment, your openness, your trust. That kind of doubt doesn't explode. It settles. And it stays. There were days when leaving made sense. Not dramatically. Not with anger. Just quietly. Days when my body was already exhausted before the work began. Days when the pain felt familiar enough to be predictable. That's the part people don't understand. Pain doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just shows up on time. Every day. I learned how to work around it. How to move without trusting certain parts of myself. How to pretend limits were suggestions. Staying wasn't about toughness. It was about identity. When you've given your life to something, walking away doesn't feel like rest. It feels like erasing yourself. So I stayed. Not because it was noble. Not because it made me stronger. Because quitting would have cost me something worse than pain. It would have cost me clarity. I needed to know that I didn't stop because things got heavy. Injuries changed how I moved. Time changed how I recovered. But responsibility didn't change. When things went wrong, it was on me. When things went right, it belonged to everyone. That imbalance does something to you. It teaches you to carry success lightly and failure heavily. And you learn quickly that no one really wants to sit with you in the in-between. They want results. They want resolution. They don't want the waiting, the uncertainty, the nights where effort doesn't feel justified yet. So you learn to sit with it alone. And the strange thing is, the longer you stay, the fewer people expect you to leave. They stop asking how you are. They assume endurance is permanent. But endurance has a cost. It always does. And paying it quietly doesn't make it disappear. Somewhere along the way, I stopped expecting to be understood. Not out of bitterness, out of experience. Understanding asks something of people. Time, attention, patience. Most people mean well. They just don't stay long enough. That's why you matter. Not because you agree with me. Not because you defend me. But because you stayed. You didn't need context. You didn't need certainty. You didn't need answers. You listened. And listening is rare. In a world that reacts instantly, presence feels almost radical. It asks nothing. It takes nothing. It just stays. I don't know where you are right now, what time it is, what kind of day you had before this, but I know something about you. You understand what it feels like to carry more than you show, to keep going without applause, without reassurance. People think strength is loud. It isn't. It's quiet. It looks like showing up again when no one would blame you for disappearing. I never needed everyone. I never did. I just needed to know that someone could sit with the truth without trying to reshape it. that someone could hear the weight without asking me to make it lighter, for their comfort. If you've ever felt overlooked, or misunderstood, or used only when you were useful, then you already know this space. And if you're still here, still listening, then maybe this isn't just my story. Maybe it's ours. There are questions that don't demand answers. They just stay with you. They surface late at night, in quiet moments, when there's nothing left to distract you. I used to think clarity would fix everything, that if I understood people better, trusted more carefully, communicated more clearly, things would align. They didn't. Effort doesn't guarantee reciprocity. Commitment doesn't guarantee loyalty. And sacrifice doesn't guarantee understanding. That realization doesn't arrive all at once. It settles slowly. Like weight you didn't agree to carry, but somehow accepted anyway. I started asking myself whether expecting consistency was unrealistic, whether loyalty was outdated, whether people were only meant to intersect briefly, take what they need, and move on. Those thoughts don't make you cynical right away. First, they make you careful, then tired. You begin measuring words, replaying conversations, wondering if being open is worth the cost. I didn't stop believing in people. I stopped believing that belief alone was enough. Boundaries replaced hope, not because hope failed, but because hope without limits leaves you exposed. And still, I didn't want to become smaller. I didn't want to reduce my world to something manageable, but empty. So I lived with the questions, not solving them, not escaping them, just letting them exist, while I kept moving forward. Because sometimes, growth isn't about answers. It's about learning how to carry uncertainty without letting it harden you. Hope doesn't arrive the way people think it does. It isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come from winning, or being praised, or finally being proven right. Hope shows up quietly, in small, almost invisible ways. It looks like someone listening, without trying to fix you. Someone staying, without asking for certainty. For a long time, I thought progress would protect me, that if I just kept moving forward, the weight would fall behind me. It didn't. It waited. But then there were moments, unexpected ones, where the noise faded. Messages that didn't demand anything. Presence without pressure. Support without conditions. People who didn't need me to be flawless or finished. You don't realize how rare that is until you've lived without it, until you've been surrounded by crowds and still felt invisible, until you've spoken into microphones and wondered if any of it mattered beyond the outcome. When I say you are my hope, I don't mean you fix anything. I mean you remind me why I started. Not to be admired, but to be honest. Not to be untouchable, but to stay connected, even when it's uncomfortable. Hope isn't optimism. It's endurance, with openness still intact. And that takes more strength than people realize. I don't believe stories need clean endings. Life doesn't work that way. Some things don't resolve. They settle. They change shape. They stay with you. There's a moment in every long journey when you realize you're not tired of the work. You're tired of being misunderstood while doing it. That realization doesn't arrive suddenly. It comes quietly. After years of explaining yourself to people who stopped listening a long time ago. I used to think being strong meant carrying everything alone, that needing less from people made you safer. I was wrong. Strength isn't silence. It's choosing not to disappear, even when retreat would be easier. Staying doesn't mean accepting everything. It means choosing presence over absence. And right now, that's enough. You don't need to know me personally to understand this space. Pain doesn't require introductions. Neither does resilience. We meet here, not in victory, not in defeat, but in honesty. This isn't a message. It isn't a defense. It isn't a performance. It's just a human moment, stretched across time, saying, I was misunderstood. I stayed anyway. And in you being here, in you, listening, without demanding more, that choice finally feels worth it.